Hi, welcome back. Today's video, we're going to talk about some really important paperwork that needs to be done to make sure that the patient's wishes are observed and to relieve a lot of stress and strain on the family. And we're going to talk about a growing trend in the United States and globally on the subject of death and dying. And yes, we are going to talk about the subject of death. It's really not that scary. It's really not that scary. And the legal paperwork is surprisingly simple. If you have been enjoying this series, this is going to be the last one. And then there's the eye icon in the top right-hand corner. If you hover your mouse over that and click on that, you can see the other previous 3 videos. So let's get started in talking about the nuts and bolts first, the legal stuff. Okay, the legal paperwork is not that intimidating. It's not hard to do. It's been designed to be simple and for a lay person to be able to understand and fill out without the assistance of a lawyer. And I will give you specific information on how to find these documents. But let me tell you why you really need them. I don't know how many times I have been talking to a family member, and let's say it's the issue of a peg tube feeding. Do we want to continue peg tube feedings or not? There's a decision that someone has to make. And I can just see the agony on the family member, whoever it is that I'm talking to, because they typically will say something like, well, you know, the patient, you know, she talked to me about some things. She didn't really specifically tell me. And what's really uncomfortable for the family member, say this one lady who's trying to make the decision, sometimes she's not even sure that she should be the one to make these decisions. She doesn't feel comfortable in that role. It just was kind of handed to her by the other family members who wouldn't take that responsibility. And so she feels so unsure of herself in many ways. And then we'll have something even worse happen. We'll have an uncle from out of town or an aunt from out of town, somebody who hasn't seen the patient in years. Family member shows up and they're totally unprepared for what they see. And now they're like insisting that we have to do this and we have to do that. And they're being unrealistic. So you've got conflict between the 2 family members. All of this could be avoided if the patient would just make a clear written statement of what procedures they want and don't want. And also, it's really important, this step is sometimes overlooked. The paper by itself is not enough. You need a person designated that will make decisions for the patient when she is no longer able, or the patient's no longer able to make their own decisions. That way, the person who is making decisions feels more confident in their decision making. And they have that first document, the written instructions, to use as a guideline. So you need both of those. And let me start with a presentation on the different types of documents, and each state varies a little bit. Let's start with that. And the first advanced directive that I want to talk about is the living will. That is where you spell out, or the patient specifically spells out, what treatments they do or do not want. And the living will does not have to be real detailed. It can be as specific or as vague as the patient feels comfortable with. The other really important thing that the living will does is that it spells out when CPR should be done and how much CPR should be done. And as I said before, different states want different things. All states want a living will. And again, you can find out what your state needs. Another form that's very helpful to have is the out-of-hospital DNR. And that is different from the living will in that the living will addresses CPR in the hospital setting, where out-of-hospital DNR means if the patient's in the ambulance or if the patient's in the home setting. Patients in the home setting with hospice definitely need an out-of-hospital DNR. because it's understood they're going to pass it home. But if anybody was to accidentally, mistakenly call 911 to a hospice patient in the home setting, then the 911 people would have to do CPR unless you've got that out of Hospital DNR signed and you can show it to them. So that's how important these papers are. The other important advanced directive that I want to talk about is the one that assigns either the person that is assigned. They're called different things. They can be called a healthcare proxy, or a medical power of attorney, or a durable power of attorney. But it all means that the patient and this person came to an agreement. This person is to make decisions for that patient. That way the uncle who comes from out of town who wants to take over, unless he has a document that shows that he has the legal right, the one that has that paperwork will make those decisions. In the process of filling out this legal paperwork, the advanced directives, you and your family have been forced to look at the forbidden subject, death. See, nothing happened that time. Just because you talk about death doesn't mean that something bad's going to happen. Just because you want to talk about somebody's eventual passing doesn't mean that you're hoping they're going to die. Just because you want to talk about your own death doesn't mean that you're planning on killing yourself. We have such a primitive, superstitious attitude as our society towards this obvious aspect of our lives. But I do see this changing. I've seen a change where, the baby boomers are kind of forcing the issue to look at end-of-life and end-of-life healthcare issues. But I've also seen it, I remember back when it was, you couldn't talk about race, not openly, only whispers. And you certainly couldn't talk about sex or anybody's sexual preferences, just couldn't talk about it in the closet, right? Well, I see death as another subject that is coming out of the closet. And as a society, I think we're more willing now to look at it. Let me give you a short list of some of the things that I found out, resources and so forth that are available for why we individually and as a society should be looking at the subject of death, our own mortality. These have just been a few of the many resources that are available, both in books or websites or YouTube videos or local meetings. I belong to the local Death Cafe here in Houston, and we have some great conversations. We only meet once a month, but it's an opportunity for us all to share with each other our ideas and feelings regarding the end-of-life issues, all the different issues about end-of-life. And you might ask yourself, well, why? Why are you talking about this terrible subject? I worked for 7 years on a psychiatric unit, and I want to clarify that. I worked on a psychiatric unit for 7 years. I was not a patient there. And I learned some things. And I learned a lot from my hospice patients. I worked 7 years on the psych unit, 15 years with my hospice patients, and they and their families have taught me that what the psychiatrists and therapists and sociologists have all been telling us for decades is all very true. We have to share what's going on inside our heads with other people. And you might ask why. It's not going to change anything. Well, you're right. It's not going to change your outside world, but it will change what's going on the inside. Your view of the world will change as you're able to express what's going on the inside of you. And I can't even explain why it works. I just have seen it work time and time again, and all the literature and all the research. It's not just me saying this, you know, there's been decades of research that shows that being able to express your feelings helps you to come to some resolution. It doesn't change the facts of the matter, but it changes how you feel about it. And it will still be a tragic situation that you won't feel happy about, but you will be able to come to a point of some acceptance. Just like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work in the 1960s, she was explained the 5 stages of dying, and the last stage of dying is acceptance. And it would be ideal if one could come to accepting an unpleasant reality and coming to some peace and resolution earlier than later in the process. And there are many ways in which you can express yourself if you're not comfortable talking to somebody, or if you're not comfortable at first talking to somebody. The first thing you can do is start journaling, or you can do a no-send letter. And for those of you that understand that psychological term means writing a letter to somebody who you're not actually going to send the letter to. But if you could talk to them, what would you tell them? And that's another way of expressing yourself. And I think that just the process, and by the way, I take all my own advice, and I have found for myself, writing something down is a very different way of thinking about it than just bouncing around in your head. And so the process of writing it down makes you think about it in a different way. And therefore your emotions kind of resolve in a different way when you start writing. And even more so when you share your thoughts with someone else. And that person, being hopefully a supportive person, will share back with you. I know our chaplain, our hospice chaplain, would reassure patients, and I would reassure my patients, that no matter how they're feeling, if they're feeling angry, if they're feeling like I'm going to fight no matter what, even if this thing does take me down, I don't care, I'm going to fight to my last breath. If that's how you're feeling, there's people who have felt that way, and not to feel ashamed. And then if they're feeling guilty because of this or they're that, or they're really sad because they didn't do something that they felt like they should have done, all the unresolved issues, that's another reason why talking about this and looking at it will also help you to identify unresolved issues. I remember another story of a child who was very close to death but would not let go, and she needed to pass, but she wouldn't, because it turned out that her pastor had told her, and with all good intentions, the pastor had told her that to go to heaven, you must love God more than anything else. And she told someone who was willing to talk to her about this and was able to get her to talk about it. She's told this person that she was afraid she wouldn't go to heaven because she loved her mom and dad better than she loved God. And so, you know, that person was able to help this little one resolve that issue. So you have unresolved issues, you have all kinds of things that need to be taken care of, and that's where talking and expressing those feelings will help. As you know, this was the last video in a 4-part series designed to help patients and families who may be facing a serious or life-threatening illness. I hope that some of the information that I've been able to share with you has been instrumental, educational, and hopefully inspirational, so that you can make the right decisions for you and your family and come to some peace and resolution in a difficult situation. And no matter how the situation turns out for you and your family, I wish you well and I wish you peace. Thank you.